Hi, we're going to start our last slideshow video lecture on civil disobedience. And so we really focus on Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. So let's take a look at Gandhi first. So Mohandas Gandhi, born in 1869, was an Indian, although he was schooled in Britain, where he obtained a law degree. Gandhi was unbearably shy, and so because of that, he really wasn't great at arguing cases in court, where you had to be a little more outgoing and forceful. And so he really devised a technique, what he calls the technique of compromise, to sort of mediate in court cases. And so he's not the most outspoken lawyer in India, but however, in 1893, he was requested by other Indians to represent them in South Africa. Remember that India was a British colonial empire as well as South Africa. So there were Indians living in both. Well, of course, living in India, but living in South Africa as well. Although not treated as the white person would be treated. And so he was requested by some Indians to represent them in South Africa. And so it's when he moves to South Africa that he first experiences racism and prejudice and discrimination. So he purchased a first-class ticket on a train to Johannesburg from Duval, and the rule was at the time that coloreds were not allowed to ride first class. And so he couldn't understand that. I mean, he was a schooled British lawyer who had a first class ticket that he had purchased, and when the conductor came through, he was very surprised that he wouldn't be allowed to stay, and really kind of put up a little bit of a fuss about it, which led him to be kicked off the train. And so that was really his first experience with any kind of discrimination or racism. And so he started to understand the plight of those who were discriminated against, who were receiving injustices. So once he was in South Africa, he represented Indians who were forced to register for the military by the Transvaal Asiatic Registration Act. So they were required to register and then carry a registration card with them, be subjected to searches and seizures without warrants, and really sort of like a mandatory draft. And Gandhi felt that this was not justified, that it was discriminatory against Indians, and so he fought against this. He struck a deal with General Smuts to repeal the law at the time. And initially, General Smuts agreed to this, but unfortunately he goes back on his word, which leads Gandhi to start his really initial campaign of nonviolent civil disobedience, which he then uses throughout the rest of his life for a variety of other injustices and inhumanities. So he calls his nonviolent civil disobedience satyagraha, which literally means soul force. So he does this in South Africa, and once things are resolved in South Africa, he decides to move back to India, not really sure what he's going to do in India. So he decides to sort of see how the rural Indians live. And what he found was what he would say were indignities or injustices against the Indian people. So he continues his practice of satyagraha as he works in India for justice for Indians. And so let's explain satyagraha a little bit. Again, satyagraha means soul force or truth force. But really the premise is a couple of things. Civil disobedience must be offered to unjust laws. So it's not optional. It's not if you feel like it. Gandhi really felt that if there was an unjust law, it was our duty to be disobedient to it. So if the law injured humans, if it was showed their indignity, if it created human suffering, it was our responsibility to disobey the law. And while doing so, know full well that we might have to face sacrifices, knowing that we should be prepared for physical, legal, and sometimes even moral consequences of this act of civil disobedience. So he really saw it as a sacrifice. Right? He believed that this disobedience must be carried out with an attitude of nonviolence and love. Right? So it's not it's not a means to the ends kind of principle, but it is carried out with an attitude of nonviolence and love. And so civil disobedience must be obeyed. Civil disobedience should be looked at as an act of sacrifice, of offering your body and your soul to the life of God. It's almost as though Gandhi saw this as a spiritual act, a religious rite, carried out with an attitude of love and nonviolence for the purpose of changing the hearts and minds of the oppressor. So it's not about necessarily just changing the laws that are oppressing people. Gandhi really believed that it was more important to change people than to change the laws. Right? So Satyagraha is simple but intentional disobedience to unjust laws, carried out with an attitude of love, courage, selflessness, and nonviolence, seen as a religious sacrifice, a religious rite, all done for the sole purpose of changing or converting individuals. Right? It's not about hating the oppressor. It's about understanding and changing the hearts and minds of the oppressor. Gandhi saw that when you defeat the opponent, what you're really doing is just sowing the seeds of hatred and creating dissension for future struggles. But if you convert the enemy is going to join you in future struggles for justice. So it's the idea that you're converting your enemy. You're changing their hearts and their minds so that they will then change their behavior and their action. Martin Luther King first heard about Gandhi at a workshop presentation on Gandhi at Howard University. And so he was really introduced to this notion of satyagraha, which he then incorporated into his own nonviolent civil disobedience and began to see it as a sort of Christian satyagraha. So he blended the ethic of Jesus of Nazareth with the civil disobedience of Mohandas Gandhi and put that together. But it has some of the same components that Gandhi would have, right? Acts carried out with an attitude of love and nonviolence, seen as a sacrifice for the purpose of changing the hearts and minds of the oppressor. King writes, American Negroes must come to the point where they can say to their white brothers, paraphrasing the words of Gandhi, we will match your capacity to inflict suffering with our capacity to endure suffering. That's where the sacrifice comes in. We'll meet your physical force with soul force. Remember, soul force is satyagraha. We will not hate you, but we cannot in all good conscience obey your unjust laws. So it's not hating the oppressor, right? And it's a duty to disobey the laws that are unjust. Do to us what you will, and we will still love you, carried out with an attitude of love and nonviolence. Bomb our homes and threaten our children. Send your hooded perpetrators of violence into our communities and drag us out onto some wayside road, beating us and leaving us half dead, and we will still love you. But we will soon wear you down by our capacity to suffer. And in winning our freedom, we will so appeal to your heart and conscience, changing the hearts and minds of the oppressor, that we will win you in the process. So you can see in those words, those are King's words, the elements of Gandhi's satyagraha. So one of the questions that King was often asked was, how do you advocate breaking some laws but yet obeying others? And here is King's answer to that. He said the answer is found in the fact that there are two types of laws. There are just and there are unjust laws. And he says he would agree with St. Augustine that an unjust law is no law at all. And so you can see the similarities between Gandhi and King, and I'm hoping that you take some time this week to really start to look at both of these theories and try to understand the purpose behind nonviolent civil disobedience. Now, there's lots of civil disobedience, and not all proponents of civil disobedience are nonviolent. You could look at Malcolm X, and Louis Farrakhan and those individuals. And while they had the same ends in mind, their means were very different, right? And so we're taking a look at nonviolent civil disobedience. Okay, thank you, and I look forward to chatting with you in your discussion boards.